Hello again. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I've got my screen recording, but I should also have a view of an IQView, somewhat ironically. So I'm going to be setting one of these things up today. So the one you can see in front of you here is an IQView 5. So this is specifically for the IQ5 controller, and I have an IQ5 controller as well. So I'm going to go through the process of setting this all up. There's a few stages to follow, so this video will jump around a little bit, but hopefully it will be fairly easy to follow. I'll do it all sequentially. So the IQView you can see in front of you, hopefully in the little webcam view, is already set up, just so you can see what the front screen is supposed to look like, and I can get to the login screen from here, which we won't bother with for now. I will be resetting the display so that when we come back to this later on, we can go through the process fully. But we're going to start with the IQ5. So you do need it licensed for the IQView 5. All of the application really is hosted in the IQ5, so that's where all of the pretty pictures and the functionality lives. So we need to license the IQ5, and there's a few settings. So this one I believe is already licensed, but I will check. So we'll go off to the feature licenser, and this will connect to my controller, look into my set strategy and see what I need to have. So I can see licensed features, yeah, pretty much everything. So IQView SCD, single controller display. So that is already licensed. I don't need to license it. So I have done that, and you may not be surprised to know I already did that. So it is already licensed. Now, if I wanted to check in the set strategy, if I go to device details and select my device, you can see it's actually a checkbox option here. So if you do that and then run the feature licenser, it would show a discrepancy and ask you to license it. So that's all good. So as I said earlier, the application is all hosted in the controller. So one of the things we do need to do is to send that down to the controller. I've already gone and got the files from PNet. You can download those, and then it's simply a matter of pointing to the files, which is this one here, as we know, and then starting the process. It does take a couple of minutes, so I'll probably speed this part of the process up. There we go, and you can see it's put the place where I can go and check the web page on it. So that is done. The only other thing I need to do in the controller really is to make sure in the network that XML web services is turned on. I've got it set to route authentication. That should work. So XML web services needs to be on. Now, I can do that in here and then download the whole strategy. You can see at the minute most of this stuff's not sent, but that would be. So if I downloaded the whole thing, the controller would be ready to go. I could just as easily do it in the web page. If we get that up. Obviously, you have to log in as the security is set up. And you'll find it under the Ethernet module. So if you didn't want to do it anywhere else, you could do it in here instead. XML web services off, turn it on, and that's it done. And again, if you wanted to check from here as to whether it was licensed, you can actually see it there. So it is ready to go. So in essence, that's the controller done. I do need one other thing, and that's to put a local user module in. Now, I think I've already done it in here. If I find it. Yeah, user one. Now that is for the IQView to log in. Now you could obviously use your admin password and all that sort of thing that we set up previously, but I would suggest using an independent one. because it's using a local display. So I've got IQView and password, which I'm not going to tell you. That's the only other thing we need to do. So the controller is essentially done at this point. So what remains to do is to configure a certificate so we can use encrypted and authenticated web page transfer between the controller and the display. Some of this is done in the controller. It's really just an export, and some of it is done in the display. In fact, the majority is done in the display. So to that end, what we need to do is export the certificate from the controller and onto a USB key, which we can then insert in the display, import the certificate, and we're good to go. Otherwise, you'll get an irritating padlock or failure on the display, which because it's not authenticated and encrypted, it will either refuse to display or you'll be doing it unsecured, which is not really what we want. Now, there's a few quirks here which are worth bearing in mind. So the most important one is if you export the certificate, and I'll show you how to do that. So from the little D inside the trend, you get into the diagnostics, and from here we have a security tab, and there we have our certificates. Now it's nice and easy to export those in the browser. You just basically click on it and they will get popped off to the downloads folder, which is pretty easily done. Okay, now the important thing to remember is how the controller is addressed. So if I come up here and show you, it's that one. Right, so mine is set to a fixed IP address. So what's going to happen is the certificate will relate exactly to that IP address. Now, unless I point the web page, the URL, to that IP address, the certificate won't match what I'm requesting and you'll get an invalid certificate. If this was auto DHCP and it had a host name, that is what would go in the certificate, and I could use the host name to then reference the web page and it would all be authenticated and great. If you get those in the wrong way around, or you end up with a certificate with a host name in, because that is clicked, but you can't refer to the controller with the host name, then it won't work. And if you have that unchecked, the certificate will have that in there. And if you refer to it using the host name, it won't work that way either. So make sure you get these around the right way. Mine is fixed IP. That is the IP address. And as you can see, on my web page, that's the way I'm referring to it. And you can use the web page to check all this, by the way. So I've already downloaded those two to my USB key. Now I only have to make one little change to make them more acceptable, which is to change CER into RT. Still valid, it's just the display wants them in that format, so that's how we'll do it. Now actually I only need the root cert. I don't really need the controller cert because that will get transferred when we go there. The root certificate, and there is a whole other video on certificates, it's not a particularly lovely topic. The root cert is the one that guarantees that this certificate is valid. So this is supplied by the controller, references the controller. This certificate guarantees that certificate. The display is going to want that one, root cert. And as you just saw, they're generated automatically. You don't have to do an awful lot to do that. So I'm going to eject the key because it's done its job in my laptop now. Like so. And I then don't have to do anything in the controller at all. Now, before I shut this screen and make the video of the display bigger, I will show you that you can test your operation in here. So if you type in IQView index.html, that is the display. So we can test it before we go on and put it in the display, but this is what we're after. Or at least it would be if I'd got the username and password right. There we go. And now you can see, it's slightly easier to see types that this is all working just fine. No problem at all. So that is a good way to test it. It proves that the controller is licensed, and I've imported the certificate already, so it proves that the certificate is valid because the browser isn't complaining. So we're all good, really. So now we'll go on, import the certificate into the display and finish the configuration of the display. So here it is in front of us. I have connected up a keyboard to the display because it is significantly easier doing that than it is trying to type on the very small screen. And if nothing else, I don't have to retype everything 5 times. So first and foremost, I'm going to get in using the default username and password. If you need to know what that is, look at the manual. Go. I have previously reset this controller, this display. Again, if you need to know how to do that, you can look in the manual. There's a process called the tap-tap procedure, which fundamentally means tapping on the screen while the thing is powering up. And then you can do a full factory reset, which is what I did prior to this video. It takes a little while, which is why I didn't record it. So now I add my new password. And the system reboots. So with the system now rebooted, the display, sorry, I can get in and using my new password, go to configure it. There's only a few things we really need to worry about. One is local system settings, and that's assuming that the network configuration is okay. I've left mine as DHCP. So things like the date and time need to be spot on. So mine is already set to my correct time zone, correct time and date, which is good. You can use it on the network time protocol if you've got one. And the only other thing I really need to do is to configure the web browser. This is the only other mandatory bit, really. And the web browser, I want, when it starts up, I want it to open the controller's web page. And again, this is somewhere where the keyboard comes in really helpful. Helps if you can spell HTML. Right, so that should be correct. 192.1.6. Yep, that looks good to me. Now, I'm going to save that quickly. Now what we need to do is import the certificate. So it's on the same menu, on the same page. So open Certificate Manager. Now, I'm going to take the keyboard out and put my USB key in, which has got the certificates on it. There we go. And the only one I really need to do is get the authorities, as in a CA, a certificate authority, which is our roots one. Browse off to the USB key and import rootcert.cr2 and trust it. In fact, I'll trust it for everything. It obviously only really need to breathe the browser, but there you go. So that should be back. That should be in there. And if you went through that list, you'd probably find it perfectly good. I'm not going to bother. So I'm going to re-enable certificate warnings. That means that if the certificate is not trusted, the display will not work properly. So now the device is restarting. And once we get to the login screen, we can of course log in. So I'll do that. This is the username and password set up in the controller, of course, not the admin password we use for the screen itself. And there we go, that's the same view but sized differently as we saw on the browser. And all working. You can have multiple users with different views and entitlements, of course, some to just see, some to adjust, but it is fully configurable with the user levels. So there we go. Now, as with a lot of these videos, it took more time to record the video than it did to actually set the screen up, by some margin in actual fact. So I hope you find this fairly helpful, and I will talk to you again soon. Thank you very much, and goodbye.